Welcome to New Stripe City, a podcast for die-hard Bengals fans. I'm your host, Ace Boogie, and today is going to be a show where I recap a lot of the things that happened during the season. I'll touch on the overall season, the actual draft. We'll talk about the AJ McCarron trade, but most importantly, I'll let you guys know exactly where I've been during this brief hiatus. So let me go ahead and start off with that. So initially, it's been a while since I've really done a video or a podcast for you guys, and I really didn't mean for it to go that way. But in life, sometimes you have real life things that happen. So I recently have me and my fiance. We recently become homeowners, so had to get that out of the way. Had to make sure that we had a nice place to actually lay our heads. So between moving and getting out of an old place and getting into a new place, yeah, that's pretty much where a lot of my energy has been. Also with closing and everything, I know you guys know the whole dreaded process of, buying a home. But yeah, that's where I've been. So in between that time, the Bengals have played a couple of games. Now we ended the season with a win. It ended on a positive note. We saw some positive signs from guys like Cody Core, Jake Fisher, which he actually got hurt in that game but came back. But overall, it was a very solid performance. So that brings me to the season. Now you guys know a couple of weeks ago I basically was calling for Marvin Lewis's head, but I've realized the more and more that I listen that he's technically going to be here for another year. So even though we might want him going, we just have to face the music and the reality that he's still going to be here. With that being said, when you look at this season, we ended at 6-9-1, not where we really expected ourselves to be at this point, but the season could have been a lot worse. It also could have been a lot better if Mike Nugent would have made three. He could have won us 3 more games just by making a field goal. So, but that's neither here or there. There's been a lot of things happening in I guess the Bengals front office in regards to certain transitions that are going to happen in the offseason. So we're entering an offseason where there's a lot of unknowns. And if you follow my Facebook page, New Stripe City on Facebook, you'll see a depth chart that I kind of posted up there. And if you look at it, we have a lot of holes at our kicker position, the Sam linebacker position, the middle linebacker position. With Pac-Man Jones's recent arrest, there's definitely some question marks at right cornerback as well. But the Bengals could go a lot of ways this offseason. I mean, there's a lot of things that they can do in free agency. There's some uncertainty on the line with Andrew Whitworth and Kevin Zeitler heading into a contract negotiation possibly during this offseason. So there are a lot of things that the Bengals will have to address. This actually is going to be one of the most exciting off seasons that we've had in a long time. But going back to the season, we were 6-9-1. In my opinion, one of the reasons for the performance that we had this year was definitely the offensive line. When you give up 41 sacks, which is the Bengals' highest total in 20 years, that's definitely going to affect your offense and your team. It's simple. We didn't do well in the trenches, whether that was from a pass rush perspective or from an offensive pass blocking and run blocking perspective. They just didn't get the job done. The Cedric Obuti or Obuti, whatever you want to call him, that experiment failed. So now we're kind of in a situation to where we have to see how things will balance out. Ken Zampese, I don't think he really did too bad for this being his first year as a coordinator. The offense didn't finish in the 20s, so honestly, Ken Zampese, in my opinion, wasn't the issue. It was really the offensive line. There are a lot of people calling for Zampese's head. I don't believe that's fair. AJ Green himself has said that he was one of the best coordinators that he's had so far, and that includes Hugh Jackson. And I don't think that he's the guy to blame. Now, if there is someone that the Bengals need to look at replacing, in my opinion, is Paul Alexander. Paul Alexander continues to play guys like Cedric. He also continues to play guys like Russell Bodine. The offensive line just let Andy get destroyed this entire year. So if there's any adjustment that needs to be made, in my opinion, it has to be Paul Alexander, the offensive line coach. Okay. The Bengals seem to not want to admit that Cedric Ogbuye is a major bust, and I don't understand why. Because there's two things that are going to happen. So the Bengals are either going to end up re-signing Witt or Kevin Zeitler. And I've been saying this for a while. I mean, you guys couldn't hear me saying it, but I feel like the Bengals are going to sign one of the two. Okay? So what the ramifications of that is, if they re-sign Witt, who is a stud left tackle, Witt is about 35 years old now, so he's going to come back more than likely on a 2-year deal. But when you do that, the future is very bleak for the tackle position. You've already decided that Jake Fisher is going to be the starting right tackle, so with Witt coming back, that means that Cedric Ogbuye is going to be his backup. And if Witt ends up getting into a scuffle with Father Time, then we're pretty much screwed at that position. Okay, they're going to have a field day on us if Cedric is starting at left tackle. We saw what happened when he went up against Jadeveon Clowney. It was ugly. It was very ugly, and I knew that it was coming. But that's the position that we're in, okay? But then you have another guy, Kevin Zeitler, on the other side. That's your second best lineman. That's, I believe, 26, 27 years old. And he's more than likely going to command at least $10 million per year. So the Bengals find themselves in a huge predicament during this offseason, and that will allow me to transition into that. So if it were up to me, in my opinion, I think that the Bengals should choose Kevin Zeitler over Big Witt. And I know I might get a lot of flack for that, but at the end of the day, the way that you have to look at it, and the way that I'm looking at it, is the future, okay? Andy Dalton is in his prime. AJ Green is in his prime. This is the time for the Bengals to make a run. Andrew Whitworth is not in his prime anymore. He probably has about 2 years left. So are you going to give him $9 to $10 million a year for 2 years and then be stuck with Cedric Ogbuye as your starting left tackle? Or do you give that money to Kevin Zeitler, who's a guy that could play for 8 to 10 more seasons? In my opinion, I would give the money to Zeitler. But that's neither here or there. The best resolution for this entire problem would be to re-sign both guys. Both guys are easily the best two linemen on this team. But with the way that the Bengals do things, I highly doubt that this is likely, just like Lapp has said. Dave Lapham has said that he thinks that it's impossible for them to re-sign both KZ and Witt. And the Bengals, I really don't understand the offer that they gave KZ, because they offered him $5.5 million per year. David DeCastro makes $10 million per year, and he's nowhere near as good as Kevin Zeitler. So, just looking at it with a realistic perspective, I think Kevin Zeitler will be the guy to go, because when you look at the depth chart that I have right now, Cedric Ogbuye is starting at your left tackle position. That can't happen. Okay, and who's backing him up? Jake Fisher, who's also starting at right tackle. With Eric Winston not in the fold, and with him being a free agent, and with Witt being a free agent, the tackles on this team are in really bad shape. Okay, now we go into the guard. What some people have theorized is that what the Bengals will do is re-sign Witt, and they'll end up moving Bowling over to right guard from left guard, which I can see that. But I think that the Bengals have a couple of options. And if you look at the depth chart that I put up there, they have the option of starting TJ Johnson at left guard. They did that in the last game against the Ravens. He didn't play too bad. They also have the option of starting Christian Westerman at right guard. And from what I hear, they're saying that they already have a guy that they feel like they can plug and play in at the right guard. So is that Bowling? Is that Westerman, who didn't even play a game this year? I have no idea. A dark horse is Trey Hopkins. But these are all guys that you have to pull from different places. And so I'm not sure exactly what the future is or what the future holds for this team. But I don't know. I'm really kind of worried about the offensive line. The offensive line is the number one at what? Let's say the number two. Number one, the first most important part of any team is the quarterback, but the second part is the offensive line. The game is won in the trenches. Okay, the guys who sell the jerseys and all of that, yeah, they sell jerseys, but the guys who actually decide the outcome of the game are your offensive linemen and your defensive linemen. So I'm kind of worried about that, being that Andy Dalton was just sacked 41 times, and you're taking his possibly you're getting rid of one of his top two linemen on the line. So that doesn't bode well for me, and you could see the impact of how the line affected this season just from looking at the 2015 season in comparison into 2016, and you can see the blatant difference. Okay, so with that, let's talk about other guys that the Bengals could resign, and then we'll go into some of the draft options. So, a lot of people have been really down on Jeremy Hill lately. I understand that. I honestly feel like he's playing better than he did last year or the season before in 2015, but that's okay. But Rex Burkhead, there's no denying that Rex Burkhead is definitely a guy that can step in and be a productive starter and could possibly cost less than Jeremy Hill. But the predicament is the Bengals have Jeremy Hill and Giovanni Bernard. So to bring back a third guy would basically mean that if they were to bring Burkhead back, he'd have to for sure be replacing Jeremy Hill the next season. So Burkhead is definitely a quality guy. He's a very productive guy, but can he really handle the burden of being the lead back? I think he can split with Gio, but I don't know. I feel like there are more pressing needs that the Bengals need to concentrate on as far as linebacker and tackle and the offensive line in general, center, over their third running back. But we'll see how things play out. I think that Burkhead himself will want to pursue other areas where he can actually get in and get some playing time. He hasn't played much. He's been here for 4 years, but he's a guy that can do it all. He can run, he can pass block, he can catch out of the backfield. So that'll be interesting to see what happens with him. On the defensive end of the ball, you're looking at guys like Domata Peko, who will be, in my opinion, more than likely gone unless he takes a severe pay cut to come back to the team, which I could see happening. But as of now, you're looking at that nose tackle position, and I'm liking it because we've got Pat Sims coming back there. Pat Sims played very well this year, and he's being backed up by Andrew Billings, who everyone can't wait to see how he's going to do. So I feel like they're pretty solid at the nose tackle position. That brings me to one of the biggest weaknesses, in my opinion, of this season was our linebacking core. After Vontaze Burfict, there was nobody else on this roster that really made an impact. Now, Nick Vigil got in and made a couple of key plays. I believe there was a third down or fourth down play where he had a pass deflection that was very big. But Nick Vigil isn't necessarily Vontaze Burfict. Okay, he's a pretty solid guy, and I'm not saying that he can't start, but the Bengals need to look into improving their linebackers. You're talking about a defense that gave up over 100 yards on the ground, and when you look at it, that says a lot more about your linebackers than it does about your actual defensive line. Because when you got guys out there like Ray Maluga, who barely played, and Carlos Dansby, who really didn't have anything left in the tank, you really didn't have anything after those guys. And those guys weren't much to write home about either. So I think that the Bengals need to look, whether it be in free agency or wherever they decide, they need to look at linebacker. Because right now, Marquise Flowers is really in the first spot of the depth chart at your Sam linebacker. And that cannot happen. Okay? let's see. We'll also talk about defensive ends. Marcus Hunt is a guy that could be on his way out of Cincinnati. He didn't have a horrible year. He didn't have a great year either. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with him. Um, and AJ McCarron could possibly be a guy that's on the move. There's been a lot of talk, and it seems like from McCarron's camp, he's getting the signal that he will be traded. Okay? And so I'll talk about this right before I get into the draft. So we'll go ahead and segue on to this AJ McCarron talk. So AJ McCarron basically is on the market. Now, in my opinion, they should have traded AJ McCarron last year because they could have commanded a lot more for him coming off of that playoff game where his stock was so high. In my opinion, they should have traded him to the Rams last year and tried to land one of those picks for him. Okay, but they didn't do that. So this season, the asking price isn't as high as it was last year, and that's fine. But you have a lot of teams that need a quarterback. Okay, now I'm friends with a couple of guys that are Jacksonville Jaguars fans, and they're in the market for a quarterback. So I asked them, what would you give up for AJ McCarron? The guy said that at the most he would give up a second round draft pick, which is, I mean, honestly, given that we've sat on him for this long, that's not bad. But some potential suitors, in my opinion, that could send us something for AJ McCarron would be the Arizona Cardinals. I really like them as a trade partner. It gets him out of the AFC, gets him over to the NFC. They need a guy to replace Carson Palmer. It's almost pretty perfect. I mean, the Cardinals have called us for a number of trades during draft day, so why not open the lines and see about getting the quarterback of the future over there? We've also got the Chicago Bears, another NFC team in need of a quarterback. I mean, the list really goes on. You really still could trade him to the Rams because the Rams paid all of that money for Jared Goff, and McCarron would allow them to get a guy that comes in for a significantly lower amount, and whichever new coach steps in there could kind of decide on pulling the plug on Goff and going with McCarron. That's another option. But the thing is, they gave up so much for him. How much do they really have to offer in return for him? Some people have thrown out the Browns. The Browns really doesn't make sense to me. Why would you make the Browns better? They're in your own division, so to me that's just nonsense. I don't care if they have one of the top picks. They're in your division. You never do something like that because AJ McCarron is a guy that can vastly improve a team, and the Browns do have, not saying that they're super talented, but they are building over there. So I would not give them a building block with AJ McCarron, which I doubt it would happen because Mike Brown hates the Browns, period. So not really seeing much of that actually happening. But yeah, there are a couple teams. I mean, the 49ers, there's a lot of teams that could use McCarron's services. So I think that at the end of the day, he could yield at most a second round pick, second and a fourth, second and a fifth, something of that nature. But yeah, I think he's a guy that they can move and definitely acquire more picks. So that brings me to the draft. Okay, so there's a lot of people, talking about the draft. We're talking about it a little bit earlier than we normally would, being that we didn't make the playoffs. And the Bengals have the number 9 pick in the draft, so it's not a bad position to be in. Now, there are several ways that they've been rumored to go, or people think that they could go. A lot of people are looking at Mike Williams, the wide receiver out of Clemson. He is a very good receiver. From what I've seen, I've cut on a little bit of his tape. He's pretty decent. He reminds me kind of Sammy Watkins, DeAndre Hopkins, I believe, was one of the comparisons that my buddy Mark threw out there, and I really kind of agree with that. He's a guy that doesn't really explode off of the ball. He's not really like a burner or anything. He's more of a big body guy. So he would be an intriguing prospect at number 9. Then we also have, I believe it's Nick Barnett, or Derek Barnett, excuse me, the defensive end. He's more of a pass rusher from Tennessee, and I really like this guy. I actually like him more than Myles Garrett. The reason I say that is because I watched some film on the left tackle Cam Robinson out of Alabama, And Barnett held his own against him. He actually had a strip sack on one of the plays, and Cam Robinson completely wiped Myles Garrett out of the game. So I think that Barnett is definitely a guy to look at. Reuben Foster, linebacker, another guy that kind of jumped out on film to me. He's a guy that you can bring in at either middle linebacker or Sam linebacker that could, be a plug and play guy from day one that would definitely improve our defense. You're also looking at the guy that I mentioned earlier, Cam Robinson, left tackle. In my opinion, I think if Cam Robinson is there, this is a guy that you have to consider for the future of your team. If it were up to me, I'm not saying that this is how things would go, but what I would do is re-sign Kevin Zeitler, and I would draft Cam Robinson and see if Witt would be willing to take a hometown discount. Either way, I would make sure that I ensure the future of this line. And Cam Robinson is a guy that was very impressive against some of the best edge rushers in this class. He's been a guy that started his entire career in college at Alabama. He started since a freshman. So the only reason that Cam Robinson will not go as high as people expect him to is because he was arrested, and I believe he wasn't charged, but the initial arrest was due to possession of marijuana and a gun. So that's not good, but similar things have happened in the past with some players that are on this roster and on other rosters that may have been a lot worse. So that's the only thing that's going against him. But in my opinion, I think that you have to look at some of the needs. And you have to look at the premium positions. Left tackle, premium position. You're looking at edge rusher, pass rusher, premium position. Linebacker, more of a need. But at this point, you can't really be mad if they do go with a linebacker at 9. So they have a lot of options. I'm going to look forward to putting together the prime. I'm definitely doing prime again this year. I did it last year. It was very on point. I've already started on it. So stay tuned because I will be filling you guys with a lot of information. But soon I will have my son on the way. So things will kind of probably when he gets here slow down a little bit. But I'll make sure that I have all of that stuff in line already for you guys. So I'll make sure that I'll have the prime done. And what that, if you don't know what prime is, it's basically a draft board that I put together that basically predicts the tendencies of who the Bengals will draft. So last time I did it, it was very on point. It was scary close. So we'll do that again this year. And we'll see where the Bengals go. But you have to look at a lot of factors before you decide who the Bengals are going to draft. There has to be the combine. There has to be pro days. There has to be free agency. That's very key, especially this year. And so depending on where they go in free agency and what happens and what plays out, then we'll see what the Bengals will do. But with that being said, I'm going to go ahead, and sign off. And this is your boy Ace Boogie. And as always, it's Who Day, all day, every day, and especially on Sunday. So make sure that you like us on Facebook. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at AMBA513. I'll be posting all kinds of stuff during and before the draft and after the draft and all of that. So we'll go ahead and wrap this up. You guys take it easy.